Welcome into OutKick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis, and I hope all of you are having fantastic Mondays wherever you may be across this great country or this great land. We have got a lot to get to, but we begin right off the top with Ravens-Browns tonight. Yes, a real live, fantastic primetime football game featuring the Cleveland Browns at home playing against the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore's around a 3-point favorite. I like Cleveland to cover. Picks in the NFL have been white hot. We went 4-2 over the weekend with the OutKick six-pack, and that was even with the brutal beat that we took in the we had the under in Philly going up against New Orleans, and Jalen Hurts fumbled late. No reason for him to be fumbling the football there as they were trying to run out the clock, and we lost by a point on the over-under in that game. So, still an incredible weekend, over 60% on the OutKick six-pack so far. I am on the Cleveland Browns tonight, plus the 3 points. You can get up to $1,000 free value if you go right now to FanDuel.com/Clay. That's FanDuel.com/Clay. All right, we got so many different storylines to get to. I want to begin with the shoe toss heard round the world. LSU, big time win for LSU on the road. The shoe toss may have cost Florida a chance to play for the national championship, and it may have also cost Kyle Trask the Heisman Trophy. No worse spin zone I can ever imagine. I respect it a little bit, even though it is absolutely insane. Here is what was said. Dan Mullen, he made the tackle. I mean, part of the football move, the kid's shoe was in his hand. He kind of threw it, jumped, and celebrated with his teammates. I don't think there was any intent to taunt. It wasn't like he was throwing it at their sidelines. That's Marco Wilson with one of the dumbest plays in the history of college football and potentially one of the most significant. It's a game that will live in infamy for Florida Gator fans. All right, so in terms of the significance, this is huge because Florida likely wins this game, right? I don't even think there's very many LSU fans out there who would argue otherwise, that Florida is a tremendous favorite to win the game. If LSU punts, as they would have done there, it would have been fourth down. They would have been 5 yards or more away from the first down sticks. And we saw how quickly Florida has been moving the ball up and down the field throughout the entirety of the game. It's likely that Florida ends up with a chip shot field goal, or maybe that Kyle Trask throws a touchdown. There would have been no time constraints really to worry about at all. Now, this is a great example of why full seasons matter. Because look at Ohio State against Purdue. Look at Ohio State against Iowa. In college football, sometimes teams lose to other teams that are vastly inferior to them. That's what happens over the entire scope of a season. So I am somewhat sympathetic to Dan Mullen's argument about how a full-length season, Florida's going to play 11, Alabama's going to play 11, Notre Dame's going to play 11, Clemson is going to play 11 games, is a lot different than the 6 that Ohio State is going to be able to play. But if you're Dan Mullen and you sit Kyle Pitts out of this game, you are sending the message to your team that you don't expect it to be close and that you expect for your team to dominate, and they probably should have. But for a bunch of crazy plays, a pick six, a tip ball interception that was like a pinball machine on the sideline that kept points from being scored by Florida, a missed 51-yard field goal from a great kicker that would have otherwise put Florida into overtime. And the resulting impact here is that you have ended up with an absolutely insane situation for the Florida Gators. This is worse to me than the Elijah Moore peeing on the field incident that cost Ole Miss head coach Matt Luke his job and also ended up getting the Mississippi State coach fired as well, Joe Moorhead, because ultimately that game didn't matter. It was the Egg Bowl. It was entertaining, it was zany, it was silly, it was a ridiculous and premeditated act by Elijah Moore. This, I actually feel bad for Marco Wilson because it was such a stupid play that it is going to follow him for years and years to come. I don't think most people will ever hear his name without thinking about this shoe penalty that he made. And I think it will linger for a very long time connected to his name and to his career. It also will stay connected to Dan Mullen, because ultimately the head coach is responsible for the decisions his players make on the field. And as good as Dan Mullen has been at Florida so far, this was a really bad loss given the circumstances, given the stakes. Now, I still think Alabama was going to crush Florida in the SEC championship game, and I think Alabama is going to go 13-0 and win the national championship. In fact, I would take Alabama over the rest of the field combined. But you at least want to play in the SEC championship game with a direct knowledge that if you win, you're in the playoff and you're one of the Final Four. Now I don't think Florida has that. It's one of the dumbest plays I have ever seen in the history of college football, and sadly, one of the most significant in the grand scheme of things. That is my takeaway from the shoe toss heard around the world in college football. Now, Michigan and Ohio State were scheduled to play on Saturday. Michigan said they weren't healthy enough to play, but the gym was open on Thursday and Friday. We now know from Jim Harbaugh. And on Sunday, Jim Harbaugh said his team had a spirited practice. So wait a minute. If your weight room is open on Thursday and Friday, and if you can have a spirited practice on Sunday, how can you not play against Ohio State on Saturday? Kirk Herbstreit got crushed for saying that he thought Michigan might wave the white flag and avoid playing against Ohio State. But Michigan didn't play against Maryland, and they didn't play against Ohio State. But they're able to use their gym on Thursday and Friday, and they're able to practice on Sunday? What sense does that make at all in terms of this potentially being a game that Michigan had no ability to play? It looks like Kirk Herbstreit should rescind his apology, and it sounds like he basically nailed it just before anybody else knew what was going to end up happening there. Kirk Herbstreit, take back your apology. Double down on what you said earlier. You, my man, were right 100% with what you said. And you got crushed for it because the data wasn't all there publicly yet. Most people didn't have access to the information that you did. Now, the Big Ten has changed its rules, and the practical impact for Ohio State may be negligible, because if they beat Northwestern, there's a very good chance that Ohio State's going to be in the college football playoff. As bad as the Big Ten has had to scramble to get itself in a position to have a playoff participant, at least they are there. How about the Pac-12? Larry Scott and every high-ranking executive in the Pac-12 should be fired on the spot for incompetence. The Pac-12 just announced about an hour and a half ago that Washington was not going to be able to play in the Pac-12 championship game on Friday. And so instead, 3-2 Oregon is going to be playing for the Pac-12 championship against 5-0 USC. Yes, you heard that correctly. 3-2 Oregon is playing for a Pac-12 championship should be in quotation marks, against 5-0 USC. Now look, there should be a study done in how to analyze data and respond to difficult situations using college football as the template in the years ahead in college, in MBA school, and any sort of leadership academy. Because what the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 have managed to do is, even in a COVID pandemic, they're going to play full seasons. They're going to crown legitimate champions who honestly may well be more deserving than your normal champion would be. And they are going to do so without even having to play the games with no fans present. Fans were there for all their games. Compare that with the Pac-12 and their inability to do anything in order to get their teams out onto the field, and the way that it's concluding here with USC going up against Oregon. I have to tell you this, and it's straightforward and it's succinct. everybody should be fired at the Pac-12. The level of incompetent leadership is off the charts. They have failed the teams. They failed the universities. They have failed the players. They have failed the coaches. And they failed the parents. This kind of abject failure should not be rewarded at all. And as a result, everybody in leadership at the Pac-12 should be forced out. They should bring in a brand new group of leaders because of the extreme incompetence that Larry Scott and his management corps has brought to bear on this issue. They have been a complete and total failure, and even worse than being a failure, they have been an embarrassment to the universities that they're in charge of running. Several other things that I want to hit here. Auburn has fired Gus Malzahn. In the comments, let me know who you think Auburn should hire. We've got over 1,000 of you who have weighed in the comments when I ask that question. I always think it's instructive. Let me just give you this example. Before you are the man or woman who gets to make an important decision, you should prep yourself for making difficult decisions by pretending that you are the person who has to make the decision. I'll give you an example of how I used to do this when I was younger. In law school, I would read all of the fact pattern of a case. And then before I read what the reasoning was, I would pretend that I was the judge who had been confronted with the fact pattern in a legal case. If you're not in law school and you're curious about what law school is like, you learn based on reading past cases, right? The history, case law. And the fact patterns are typically the first thing that you read in a case. Before the law is applied, you read all the undisputed facts of a particular situation, and then the law is applied to see exactly what the impact should be. And so, to me, this is one of the great ways that you can plan to prepare yourself for one day being the person who gets to make the decisions. Look at what past history difficult decisions have been. Study history. Think of yourself as the person in a position of power. And so I enjoy thinking about this as if you were the athletic director at Auburn. Who should you be hiring to replace Gus Malzahn? And I'll get to that in a moment. I'm interested in seeing all of your suggestions. YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, everywhere out there where people are watching this. You can hit me on Twitter at Clay Travis and let me know your suggestions. But the first thing here is Gus Malzahn is getting paid $21.7 million. Half of that within 30 days by Auburn boosters to no longer be the head football coach at Auburn. Early on, there was this idea that nobody was going to get fired in college football because we were in a pandemic season. Then Will Muschamp got fired. Derek Mason got fired. Lovie Smith has been fired at Illinois. Gus Malzahn at Auburn. Kevin Sumlin out at Arizona. I'm sure there are other coaches that I'm forgetting right now who have also been fired or will be fired. $21.7 million not to do your job anymore is a heck of a payday for Gus Malzahn. And look, I went back and I looked and I was like, okay, I feel like Gus Malzahn has been on the hot seat for a long time, and I thought this was interesting. Malzahn is 68-35 in 8 full years at Auburn. Went to 2 SEC championship games, the BCS National Championship game. But since 2013, he is just 19-3 against SEC teams below 500, but just 20-24 against SEC teams above 500. And so effectively, Gus Malzahn has been a middle-of-the-road coach in the SEC who sometimes blips up to have extreme amounts of success. He almost won a national championship in the Jameis Winston year that Florida State won the title, and he certainly has been good enough at times to win big games, but most often he is not. So what does Auburn do now? Who should Auburn be considering? When you're paying $21.7 million for a coach to no longer be head of your program, a couple of days before signing day, which is Wednesday, you would think that there has to be a plan in place to make solid decisions there. You would think. And so to me, the two names that immediately come to mind are Mario Cristobal at Oregon. We'll see whether or not he's interested in leaving the Ducks. He's been recruiting very well there. Solid performance overall for talent. And also, the other name that comes to mind is not going to surprise any of you, Hugh Freeze. So those are big names. Now, there's other guys, Billy Napier, Kevin Steele, the defensive coordinator of Auburn, who has been there and done pretty well. There's probably some support for him. But if you're going to pay $21.7 million for somebody not to coach anymore, I think you need some sizzle in order to make that actually happen. And I don't know what that sizzle is going to look like, but I got to believe that there's some sizzle to go along with the Auburn steak. I am fascinated to see what the Tigers end up doing as it pertains to that job. Okay, couple of other things. Vanderbilt has made their hire, Clark Lee. I don't know Clark Lee, never met him, but on paper, solid hire. Defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, former football player at Vanderbilt, born and raised in Nashville, went to Montgomery Bell Academy, a top private high school in the Nashville area. It's just down the street from Vanderbilt. Checks a lot of boxes for the Commodores. What it doesn't do is answer the question of what's going to happen on the offensive side of the ball. Because Derek Mason came in as the defensive coordinator from Stanford. Now you're going to get another defensive coordinator from another elite private institution. And I think it remains to be seen exactly what's going to happen on the offensive side of the ball for Vanderbilt. But I think that is a very good hire in general. All right. Before I dive into the NFL, I want to take a moment here to tell you vaccinations are underway. And this is an incredible accomplishment, one of the greatest accomplishments in human history, that we have gone from a virus we didn't know existed until January or February and wasn't in the country in substantial magnitude until March. And now, by December, not only have we created a vaccine for that new virus, we have now begun already to distribute those vaccines to people across the country, and people are truly being vaccinated already. So the hope would be that if we can get everybody in nursing homes and long-term care facilities vaccinated, and we have enough to be able to do that, hopefully before New Year's, then given the fact that around 50% of all people dying with COVID are in nursing homes, after the first of the year, if the vaccine works, the amount of people who are dying with COVID, and again, with is key because the average person dying with COVID is doing so with at least 2 to 3 comorbidities. So if you have kidney failure and you also have COVID, you are counted as a COVID death. If you are in stage 4 lung cancer and you are close to death and you get COVID, you are counted as a COVID death, okay? So all of these things adding up together, the average age of death from COVID is older than the average age of death from all causes in this country. But for all the fear porn people out there, for all the corona bros, if we get a vaccine distributed to all of the long-term care facilities and the nursing homes in this country, then the number of people dying with COVID should rapidly decline by about 50%. And then we can start to roll it out to people who are under serious health-related concerns. And my hope is that by the spring, this story is almost completely gone. But the overall achievement of the country should not be discussed here. The President of the United States, everybody working with Pfizer and Moderna, everyone in the government, all of the tireless workers who have managed to create this opportunity to distribute this vaccine, it is one of the greatest accomplishments in the history of mankind, a Manhattan Project brought to bear against the virus. And if anything, not surprisingly, the media is not selling the idea of what has been accomplished here aggressively enough. And I think one reason that's occurring is because Donald Trump is president of the United States. And you know that deep down, the Biden administration is incredibly disappointed that the virus, the vaccine, is going to be distributed for over a month before Inauguration Day because he can't sweep in and suddenly claim that he is the savior of the country. Joe Biden's entire presidential campaign was basically predicated on COVID. If COVID doesn't happen, Donald Trump wins in a landslide. Even with COVID happening and all of the crazy ways that people ended up voting, Trump lost the presidency by around 40,000 votes in this tally. 10,000 in Arizona, 20,000 in Wisconsin, and around 10 to 12,000 in Georgia. You flip 21,000 voters? That's like one basketball arena? And the outcome of the election changes because we end up in a 269 tie, which Donald Trump would have won in the House of Representatives. So this idea that anything other than COVID got Joe Biden into the presidential, winning the presidential election is crazy. COVID doesn't happen. Donald Trump wins in a landslide. It's not even remotely close, which is why I think it's intriguing to think about what Trump wants to do going forward. I don't know if he's going to run again in 2024, but getting this vaccine out, this is what I said immediately. I said, don't focus on the election. Challenge it as you see fit, but get the vaccine out and distribute it. And then you can argue, hey, we beat COVID. We started the distribution. The only reason I lost was because of the media fear porn, which I think is accurate. And therefore, I'm going to come back and I'm going to run again. And I think he would have a compelling case because I'm not sure what Joe Biden is planning to do that is going to be any kind of signature achievement. And certainly he's not going to run again. But this is a signature achievement, one of the greatest achievements in human history to have this vaccine going out. And I can't believe it's not receiving more attention. It is amazing what we have been able to accomplish as a country and as a group of people getting this thing out there. All right. And by the way, all of the media out there said that there was no way it was going to be possible to actually get this vaccine out before the end of the year. In fact, NBC fact check. Coronavirus vaccine could come this year, Trump says. Experts say he needs a miracle to be right. Well, thank you, Donald Trump, for making a miracle happen. NBC said there was no way that the vaccine would be out before the end of the year. And guess what? It happened. CBS said the same thing. Donald Trump making miracles happen. All right, I got to tell you, I am sitting right now in my XChair, and it is absolutely fantastic. It is the best chair that I have ever sat in anywhere, ever. And guess what? I've sat in a lot of chairs over the years. It's the most efficient. It's the most effective. It is the best out there in terms of being able to make me more efficient. What can it do for you? A great deal. Let me tell you how. All you need to do is go to XChair.com. XChairClay.com. That's XChairClay.com. That's the letter X, chair, Clay, my name, C-L-A-Y, or call 1-844-4XChair, 30-day guarantee. And right now, if you go to XChairClay.com, you get $100 off. That is XChairClay.com. Get hooked up right now. And again, this is the most comfortable chair I have ever sat in. It makes a tremendous difference in my effectiveness and efficiency at home, working from home like many of you do. There are a lot of things that go into my day, and I need to be able to get taken care of. This thing has a dynamic variable lumbar and a heat massage therapy that it offers. Separates this chair from every other chair on the market and continually adjust with your body, providing incomparable support and better posture while giving you the benefits of a heat and massage. This is amazing. Without this chair, you are selling your body and your productivity short. XChairClay.com. A lot of people out there right now getting hooked up with new home office environments. You need a new chair. XChairClay.com to save $100 in the process. All right, the Bills dominated the Steelers. Steeler fans, this is why nobody is afraid of your team. You are a good team, not a great team. I wouldn't be surprised, given the Steelers' inability to run the football, if they lost in their first game in the playoffs. The significance of the Bills' win is that The Chiefs are now the number 1 overall seed, just what everybody needed. The Chiefs having to win fewer games to win a Super Bowl. The Chiefs are now the number 1 seed in the AFC. The number 1 seed in the NFC is the Green Bay Packers. Right now, I would project Chiefs going up against the Saints. That's assuming Drew Brees eventually comes back healthy, because I like the Saints defense and offense combo more than I like the Packers. But this Bills domination, it's an example of how our analysis of drafted quarterbacks can change over time. Think about it. There were 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round of the draft. Baker Mayfield first. In the 3 years ago. Baker Mayfield first. Second quarterback taken was Josh Allen. Third was Josh Rosen, if I'm remembering correctly. Sam Darnold was the second. Here, let me refresh and rephrase all this. There are now 3 quarterbacks that it looks like from 3 years ago are going to be potentially starters for a while. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are the best 2. I don't think anybody anticipated that of those 5 quarterbacks, the best 2 so far would be Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Those are the 2 that we are debating. Baker Mayfield is the next best. And then we've had 2, I think it's fair to say, busts so far. Sam Darnold and also Josh Rosen. But I would say the 2 that people expected to be the least successful, Josh Allen, most criticized, everybody went after him. Lamar Jackson, nobody expected him to be that good, are the 2 best quarterbacks so far coming out of this first-round draft class. And Josh Allen's just getting better and better. Last year, it looked like Lamar Jackson was going to be the best quarterback for years to come. Now I think it's going to be Josh Allen who is the best quarterback for years to come based on what I'm seeing there. Congrats to Bills fans who are going to be able to host a home playoff game in Orchard Park, it appears, for the first time since the 1995 football season, which is incredible. I just wish there were going to be fans present. And by the way, the Browns, big game tonight. We'll see what happens. I already told you, FanDuel.com/Clay, up to $1,000 free to gamble with if you put that money in and wager it on your first wager. I have got the Browns +3 tonight against the Ravens. There's a couple of other ridiculous stories that are out there that I want to make sure I hit. The Cleveland Indians are changing their mascot. Let me take a drink and I'm going to talk about that. I'm not one of these guys who is wildly committed to the Washington Redskins name. My thing is, where does it end? Right? Like, let's pretend that I was the representative for non-woke culture. And I could sit down with whoever the representatives are of woke culture. And we could negotiate a long-term solution to end all of this ridiculous perpetual offendedness. What agreement could we enter into? Where could we end cancel culture? And the answer is, I don't think you can do it. Because the far left wingers who are reliant upon cancel culture always need something new to be offended by. Otherwise, they just have to go to work and sit down and shut up and stop whining. And they never will do it. So initially it was the Redskins. As soon as one gets knocked off, then there's another one that comes up. Well, now it's the Indians. The Cleveland Indians are changing their name. And then you know what's going to happen? The Kansas City Chiefs and the Atlanta Braves. And maybe somewhere down the line, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish is going to be considered offensive. So the question becomes, why? Why is there this perpetual outrage cycle? And why can't we just have a negotiated end to perpetual indignation over mascot names? Because they don't actually want that. They don't want change. They want something to moan and complain and whine about. If that doesn't happen, then they have no reason to exist. The far left wing, they're the tip of the progressive spear. If there's nothing for them to be upset about and try to cancel, then there's absolutely nothing left. Think about it. We're now to the point where they aren't even pointing to actual things that exist. They're talking about systemic things, things that can't even be directly pointed to as issues in the country. Not actual things, things that don't have any ability to reconcile themselves. right? Like, it's one thing to say, hey, we need a law to keep people from discriminating against others based on their race, religion, sex, whatever else. Okay, we got that. Now, they got to have structural inequality arguments because there isn't any tangible issue at play that can be reconciled. So now everything is systemic. And that's kind of what's going on with the Cleveland Indians name. I'm not attached to them that much. I don't care about the Chiefs mascot. I really don't care about the Atlanta Braves mascot. I think it's cool when everybody does the tomahawk chop, personally. I think that's fun. I think it's cool. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, okay? But the problem is, you know where this is headed. The Indians give up their mascot, and now what happens? Well, the Chiefs and the Braves are next up. And then if those teams end up changing, it doesn't ever end, right? You move on to something else. Oh, I'm offended by the Florida State Seminoles, even though they have an agreement with the tribe. Oh, I'm offended by whatever the heck it might be. There's always something else to be offended by. Cancel culture never rests. And that, my friends, is why you have to combat it. And that's also why I've come to respect the NRA. I'm not a hardcore gun guy, but the NRA people get it. The goal of NRA opponents is not to create small measures of gun control. It's to take away the right to bear arms. That's their goal. Oh, we're going to take this small part away. And then we'll take this small part away. And we're just going to chip away at those rights until ultimately the right doesn't exist anymore. So I actually respect people who are hardcore Second Amendment gun people for saying, no, you're not going to be able to get us to give up anything because we know that your goal is not this small little insignificant aspect of adjustment. It is actually to take away this entire right. And you're just chipping it away as fast as you actually can. Let's not disguise what the goal is. And that's what's going on with cancel culture. That's why all this, like tear down the Washington Monument, tear down the Jefferson Memorial, tear down the Lincoln Memorial. They want to fundamentally destroy America. That's what they want. Because they have bought into the idea that America is an evil and venal place, and they want to replace it. They want to replace capitalism. That's the goal, make no mistake. They want to replace everything that has made America the shining city on the hill, the democratic republic embraced in marketplaces and capitalism, which is the most dynamic type of government that has ever existed in the history of the world and the most successful at lifting people out of poverty, providing freedom. They want to destroy that. That's their goal, make no mistake about it. And I'm not going to let them. I'm going to be fighting them for the rest of my life. I am Clay Travis, DBAP unless you need to SBAP. Go sign up for the OutKick VIP if you love me and love what OutKick represents, outkick.com. Thank you for making 2020 the best professional year of my life. I will see you guys on television in a bit. This has been OutKick the Show.